The sky was the color of spilled whiskey when Olivia Porter stepped off the dusty stagecoach in Willow Creek, Montana Territory, 1873. Her gloved hands trembled as she clutched her worn leather satchel, the only possession she'd brought besides the clothes on her back, and a heart full of desperate hope. The advertisement she'd answered had been brief, seeking nanny for 5-year-old girl. Room, board, fair wages. Inquire G. O'Malley, Box 14, Willow Creek. What the advertisement hadn't mentioned was that Willow Creek was barely more than a cluster of weathered buildings clinging to the edge of vast, untamed wilderness. Olivia adjusted her simple blue calico dress and straightened her bonnet. At 23, she'd already weathered enough hardship to last a lifetime. Orphaned at 16, working as a seamstress in Boston until the tuberculosis outbreak had claimed the family she served, leaving her without references or prospects. This position was her last hope. The stagecoach driver tossed down her trunk. "Miss, you sure this is where you're headed? Ain't much out here for a lady like yourself." "I'm quite certain," Olivia replied, though her pounding heart suggested otherwise. "I'm to meet Mr. O'Malley. Do you know where I might find him?" The driver scratched his grizzled beard. "Garrett O'Malley, ranch about 4 miles north, keeps to himself mostly since his wife passed. A widow with a young daughter." The realization settled in Olivia's stomach like a stone. The advertisement hadn't mentioned that either. "Is there someone who might drive me there?" she asked, looking around the dusty main street where a few curious onlookers had paused to observe the stagecoach's arrival. "That'd be me," came a deep voice from behind her. Olivia turned to see a tall man leading a chestnut mare. He wasn't what she'd expected. No weathered cowboy in dusty clothes, but a man in his early 30s wearing a clean white shirt under a leather vest, dark pants tucked into polished boots. His face was partly shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat, but she could see a strong jawline covered with several days' stubble. "Mr. O'Malley?" she asked. He nodded once. "Miss Porter, I presume?" "Yes, sir. Thank you for meeting me." His eyes, a startling shade of green, assessed her briefly. "Wasn't expecting the Boston stagecoach today. Good thing I was in town for supplies." He gestured to several packages tied to his saddle. "Hope you don't mind riding. Got a wagon at home, but brought Penny here instead." Olivia glanced at the horse nervously. "I've never actually ridden before, Mr. O'Malley." Something like amusement flickered across his face. "Then you'll ride with me. Your trunk can wait until tomorrow." Before she could protest, he secured her satchel to the saddle, then in one fluid motion, mounted the horse and extended his hand down to her. "I don't know if I can," Olivia began. "You'll have to, Miss Porter, unless you fancy walking 4 miles. His voice wasn't unkind, just matter of fact. Taking a deep breath, Olivia removed her bonnet, tucked it into her satchel, and accepted his hand. With surprising strength, he pulled her up to sit sideways in front of him, one strong arm securing her while the other held the reins. "Hold on," he instructed, and then they were moving. The closeness was shocking, improper by Boston standards, but Olivia quickly realized that propriety took different forms in this wild territory. She clutched the saddle horn, acutely aware of the warmth of his chest against her back, the steady rhythm of his breathing. "Your letters didn't mention you were from Boston," he said as they left the small town behind, the vast Montana landscape opening before them. "I didn't think it mattered where I was from," she replied. "Only that I could care for your daughter." He was quiet for a moment. "Emma needs stability." "Had 3 nannies in the past year. None lasted more than a few months." Olivia swallowed hard. "May I ask why?" "Life out here isn't easy, Miss Porter. It's not Boston drawing rooms and cobblestone streets. It's hard work from sunup to sundown. It's isolation and winter storms that can last for weeks. It's making do with what you have because the nearest proper store is half a day's ride away." "I'm no stranger to hard work, Mr. O'Malley," she said, her back stiffening slightly. "And I didn't come from drawing rooms." I came from a seamstress's workroom where I spent 14 hours a day bent over fine stitches until my fingers bled and my eyes couldn't focus. He fell silent again, and she worried she'd overstepped. But after a moment he said, "Good, you'll need that spirit." As they crested a hill, Olivia gasped. Below them stretched a valley of such breathtaking beauty that it momentarily stole her words. A log cabin nestled against a backdrop of towering pines, with a barn and corral to one side. A stream wound through pastureland where cattle grazed. Behind it all, mountains rose blue and majestic against the deepening evening sky. "That's your home," she whispered. "Ours," he corrected. "Built it myself when I married Catherine. Added on when Emma came along." The mention of his late wife softened his voice, and Olivia felt a pang of sympathy. "It's beautiful. It's a hard place to love sometimes," he said, "but it's ours." They rode down into the valley, and as they approached the cabin, the door burst open. A small figure in a blue dress darted out, golden hair flying behind her. "Papa, Papa," the child called, then stopped short when she saw Olivia. Garrett dismounted easily, then reached up to help Olivia down. Her legs felt unsteady after the ride, and she clung to his arms longer than was proper before finding her balance. "Emma," he said, turning to the little girl who was now hiding partially behind a porch post. "This is Miss Porter. She's come all the way from Boston to be your new nanny." Emma regarded Olivia with serious blue eyes, her father's eyes. Olivia realized and didn't move from her hiding spot. Olivia approached slowly, then knelt despite the dust on her dress. "Hello, Emma. I'm very pleased to meet you. Your father tells me you're 5 years old." "What a wonderful age to be." The little girl nodded solemnly, but said nothing. "Emma has her mother's looks but my disposition, I'm afraid," Garrett said, lifting the packages from his saddle. "Give her time." Inside, the cabin was simple but comfortable. A large main room served as kitchen and living area, with a sturdy table, a few chairs, and a stone fireplace. 2 doors led off to what Olivia assumed were bedrooms. "You'll share with Emma," Garrett explained, showing her to the smaller room with 2 narrow beds. "My room's across the way. There's a washroom out back. We get water from the pump in the yard." "It's lovely," Olivia said, and meant it. The room was clean, with colorful quilts on the beds and curtains at the small window. "Supper's simple tonight," he said. "Been in town all day." Over a meal of beans, bacon, and biscuits left from morning, Olivia tried to engage Emma in conversation. But the child merely watched her with those solemn eyes, answering only in nods or shakes of her head. "She'll warm up," Garrett said as he cleared the plates. "Always takes her time with strangers." After supper, while Garrett sat at the table going over what looked like ledgers, Olivia noticed a small bookshelf in the corner. "Would you like me to read to you before bed, Emma?" she asked. The little girl looked to her father, who nodded encouragingly. Slowly, Emma went to the shelf and selected a worn copy of Jack and the Beanstalk. They settled in a chair near the fire, and as Olivia began to read, Emma gradually leaned closer, eventually allowing her small body to rest against Olivia's side. By the story's end, the child's eyes were heavy with sleep. "I'll take her," Garrett said, closing his ledger. "I can manage," Olivia offered, and after a moment's hesitation, he nodded. In their shared room, Olivia helped Emma change into her nightgown and tucked her into bed. "Good night, Emma," she whispered, brushing a golden curl from the child's forehead. "Are you going to leave too?" Emma asked suddenly, her voice small in the quiet room. The question caught Olivia off guard. "Why would I leave? The others did. They said it was too hard here." Olivia's heart constricted. "Well, I'm not afraid of hard things, Emma. I plan to stay as long as you and your father want me here." The child said nothing more, but her small hand reached out to grasp Olivia's fingers as she drifted off to sleep. Later, when Emma was sleeping soundly, Olivia returned to the main room where Garrett was still at the table, his ledgers pushed aside, a glass of amber liquid before him. "She's asleep," Olivia said. "She asked if I was going to leave too." Garrett nodded slowly. "She always asks. Never gets attached anymore, can't blame her." What happened to her mother, if I may ask? He took a slow sip before answering. Childbirth fever. Emma was 3 days old. I'm so sorry, Olivia said softly. Catherine wasn't built for this life, city girl from Denver. I should never have brought her here. His voice was flat, but Olivia sensed the deep current of pain beneath the words. Emma doesn't remember her, but she feels the absence all the same. Children are perceptive that way. He looked at her then, really looked at her, as if seeing her clearly for the first time. Why did you come here, Miss Porter? Truth now. Olivia straightened her shoulders. I had nowhere else to go. The family I worked for died of tuberculosis. Without references, no respectable household in Boston would hire me. Your advertisement offered a fresh start. And you're not afraid, out here miles from anything you know. I'm terrified, she admitted, surprising herself with her honesty. But fear has never stopped me before, and I won't let it now. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. We rise at dawn. Emma needs breakfast and lessons in the morning. Afternoons you can help with household tasks. I'll be with the cattle or in the fields most days. I understand. He stood, his tall frame casting long shadows in the lamplight. One more thing, Miss Porter. Out here we depend on each other. There's no room for pretense or falsehood. If this arrangement isn't working, I expect you to say so plainly. I will, she promised. And the same goes for you, Mr. O'Malley. He nodded once, then wished her good night, leaving her alone with the crackling fire and the enormity of the change she'd made in her life. That night, lying in the unfamiliar bed listening to Emma's soft breathing, Olivia wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. But when she finally drifted to sleep, it was with the memory of the valley's beauty and the feeling that perhaps, just perhaps, she had found a place where she could belong. The first week passed in a blur of adjustment. Olivia learned the rhythm of the ranch, the early mornings when Garrett would ride out to check the cattle, the quiet afternoons when she taught Emma her letters and numbers, the evenings when they would gather around the table for the day's main meal. Emma remained reserved but not unfriendly. She followed Olivia's instructions and participated in lessons, but there was a guardedness about her that broke Olivia's heart. This was a child who had learned not to become attached, who expected abandonment. As for Garrett, he was a puzzle Olivia couldn't quite solve. He was unfailingly polite but distant, as if he too had built walls to protect himself. She rarely saw him during the day, and in the evenings, conversation was limited to practicalities, what supplies were needed, how Emma's lessons were progressing, what chores needed attention. On her 8th day at the ranch, Olivia was hanging laundry on the line when she heard a horse approaching. A woman perhaps 10 years her senior rode up, her practical riding clothes and confident posture suggesting she was no stranger to ranch life. You must be the new Nanny, the woman called, dismounting gracefully. Grace Sullivan. My husband Daniel and I have the neighboring ranch about 3 miles east. Olivia Porter, she replied, wiping her hands on her apron before offering one to shake. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Sullivan. Grace, please, we don't stand on ceremony out here. She smiled warmly. How are you settling in? Garrett can be. Well, Garrett, it's an adjustment, Olivia admitted, but a welcome one. And Emma, has she warmed up to you yet? Olivia sighed. Not entirely. I can't blame her given what Mr. O'Malley told me about the previous nannies. Grace nodded sympathetically. That child has had too much loss in her young life. Catherine's death nearly destroyed Garrett. He withdrew from everyone, focused entirely on the ranch and Emma. Daniel and I have tried to help, but, she shrugged, men like Garrett don't accept help easily. I've noticed, Olivia said dryly. Grace laughed. You'll do just fine here, I think. Listen, we're having a small gathering at our place this Saturday. Nothing fancy, just some of the local ranchers and their families. You should come, all of you. It would be good for Emma to play with other children and for you to meet some folks. That sounds lovely, but I'll have to ask Mr. O'Malley. Ask me what? Garrett's deep voice came from behind them, causing both women to start. Garrett O'Malley, you nearly scared us to death, Grace scolded. I was just inviting your household to our gathering on Saturday. He removed his hat, revealing hair the color of dark honey, damp with sweat from the morning's work. Don't know, Grace, lots to do here. There's always lots to do. Daniel hasn't seen you in weeks, and Emma needs to socialize with children her own age. Grace put her hands on her hips. Besides, I've just met your new nanny, and I won't have you keeping her isolated out here like some hermit. A muscle twitched in Garrett's jaw, but after a moment he nodded. Fine, we'll come for a few hours. Grace looked triumphant. Excellent, 2 o'clock, she turned to Olivia. Bring a pie if you bake, if not, just bring yourselves. After Grace had ridden away, Garrett stood awkwardly by the laundry line. Don't feel obligated. If you'd rather not go, I'd like to, Olivia interrupted, and I think it would be good for Emma. Grace means well, but she can be persistent. She seems kind, Olivia observed. It's nice to know you have friends nearby. Daniel and I came out here together after the war, fought side by side at Gettysburg, then decided we'd had enough of crowds and noise. A shadow crossed his face. They've been good to Emma, especially after Catherine. He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. Olivia understood that grief was still a raw wound for him. I do bake, by the way, she said, changing the subject. My apple pie was quite famous in my Boston neighborhood. The ghost of a smile touched his lips. Emma loves apple pie. Catherine used to make it for special occasions. Then I'd be honored to continue the tradition, Olivia said softly. He looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable in his eyes, then nodded and walked away toward the barn. That night, as Olivia was tucking Emma into bed, the little girl asked, Are we really going to the Sullivans on Saturday? Yes, we are. Would you like that? Emma nodded. They have a boy and a girl. Tommy's 7 and Jenny's 6. They have toys. That sounds wonderful. Perhaps you can show me how to play with them. Emma seemed to consider this seriously. You don't know how to play. I'm afraid I've forgotten. It's been a long time since I was a little girl. I could teach you, Emma offered, and for the first time, Olivia saw a genuine smile light up the child's face. I would like that very much, Olivia said, her heart warming at this small breakthrough. The Sullivans' ranch was larger than the O'Malley place, with a 2-story house and several outbuildings. When they arrived on Saturday, Olivia was surprised to see at least a dozen horses hitched outside and the sound of laughter and conversation drifting from the back of the house. Bigger gathering than usual, Garrett muttered as he helped Emma down from the wagon. He was dressed in his Sunday best, a clean shirt, vest, and pants that had clearly been pressed. Olivia herself had spent the morning pressing her second-best dress, a green calico that brought out the gold flecks in her brown eyes. Her chestnut hair was neatly pinned up, with a few curls left to frame her face. You look pretty, Emma had declared when Olivia emerged from their room. Now, as they approached the gathering, Olivia felt a flutter of nervousness. It had been a long time since she'd been in social company. Grace spotted them immediately and hurried over. You came, wonderful, she bent down to Emma's level. Jenny and Tommy are over by the swing. Why don't you join them? Emma looked up at her father, who nodded encouragingly, and then she was off, running toward the other children with more animation than Olivia had yet seen from her. Come, I'll introduce you around, Grace said, taking Olivia's arm. Daniel, look who's here. Daniel Sullivan was a broad-shouldered man with a kind face and an easy smile. Garrett, you old hermit, about time you showed your face. The men shook hands warmly. And you must be Miss Porter. Grace hasn't stopped talking about meeting you. All good things, I hope, Olivia replied with a smile. The best, Grace assured her. Now, let me introduce you to everyone else. The afternoon passed pleasantly. Olivia met the doctor from town, several neighboring ranchers and their wives, and the local schoolteacher. The conversation was lively, the food abundant, and the company welcoming. She found herself relaxing, enjoying the sense of community that had been missing from her life in Boston. From across the yard, she occasionally caught glimpses of Garrett. He wasn't exactly the life of the party, but he was engaged in conversation with Daniel and some of the other men. a glass of whiskey in his hand, his posture more relaxed than she'd seen it. As the sun began to set, someone produced a fiddle, and impromptu dancing began on the packed earth of the yard. Olivia watched, clapping along as couples twirled to a lively reel. "May I have this dance, Miss Porter?" She turned to find Garrett beside her, hand extended, an expression of uncertainty on his face that she found endearing. "I'd be delighted, Mr. O'Malley, though I must warn you I'm not familiar with these dances." "Just follow my lead," he said, taking her hand. His grip was firm but gentle as he guided her into the circle of dancers. The steps were simple once she caught on forward and back, turn your partner, promenade. Garrett moved with surprising grace for such a tall man, and Olivia found herself laughing as they twirled beneath the lanterns strung across the yard. "You're a natural," he said, and the genuine warmth in his voice sent a flush of pleasure through her. "You're an excellent teacher," she replied. The music slowed to a waltz, and couples around them drew closer. Garrett hesitated for just a moment before placing his hand at her waist, maintaining a respectable distance between them as they began to move to the gentle rhythm. "Thank you for coming today," he said quietly. "It's been good for Emma. I haven't seen her smile like that in a long time. She's a wonderful child. She just needs to feel secure to know she won't be abandoned again." His eyes, reflecting the golden lantern light, held hers. "Is that what you're offering, security?" The question seemed to hold more weight than its simple words suggested. "I meant what I told her that first night, Mr. O'Malley. I plan to stay as long as you both want me here." Before he could respond, a small figure barreled into them. Emma, her hair escaping its ribbons, her cheeks flushed with excitement, wrapped her arms around Olivia's waist. "Miss Porter, Jenny showed me how to do cartwheels. Will you watch me?" Over the child's head, Olivia's eyes met Garrett's. Something passed between them, an understanding, perhaps, or the beginning of one. "Of course I'll watch you," Olivia said, taking Emma's hand. "Lead the way." As they walked away, Olivia could feel Garrett's gaze following them, and she wondered what thoughts were passing behind those enigmatic green eyes. The gathering wound down as darkness fell fully. Emma, exhausted from play, fell asleep in the wagon on the way home, her head resting trustingly against Olivia's shoulder. "She had a wonderful time," Olivia said softly as Garrett guided the horses through the darkness, the way lit only by his lantern and the stars above. "We all did," he replied. "Thank you for the pie. Grace said everyone was asking for your recipe. Family secret," Olivia said with a smile, "but I might be persuaded to share it for the right price." "And what would that be?" There was amusement in his voice. "Perhaps another dance someday." Even in the dim light, she could see his smile, the first real, unguarded smile she'd seen from him. "I believe that could be arranged, Miss Porter." Something shifted between them after the Sullivans' gathering. Garrett began joining them for breakfast more regularly, lingering over coffee while Emma chattered about her plans for the day. Sometimes in the evenings, instead of retreating to his ledgers, he would sit by the fire while Olivia read to Emma, occasionally adding his deep voice to the story when different characters spoke. Emma, too, was changing. The guarded look in her eyes was fading, replaced by a child's natural curiosity and exuberance. She began seeking Olivia out for comfort when she scraped her knee or couldn't manage a difficult lesson, and her goodnight hugs grew longer and tighter. One crisp October afternoon, nearly 2 months after Olivia's arrival, she was teaching Emma to make simple biscuits when Garrett burst through the door, his face grim. "What's wrong?" Olivia asked immediately, wiping flour from her hands. "Cattle broke through the north fence line." "Storm must have weakened it. I've got to round them up before dark." He was already grabbing supplies rope, his heavy coat. "How many men do you need?" Olivia asked, thinking of the neighboring ranches. "No time to fetch help, I'll manage." He knelt briefly to kiss Emma's forehead. "Be good for Miss Porter, I might be late." And then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a decisive click. Olivia tried to maintain a calm demeanor for Emma's sake, but as afternoon turned to evening and then to night with no sign of Garrett, worry gnawed at her. The temperature was dropping rapidly, and dark clouds gathering on the horizon suggested a storm was brewing. "Where's Papa?" Emma asked for the third time as Olivia tucked her into bed much later than usual. "He's still helping the cattle," Olivia explained, "but he'll be home soon. You sleep now and perhaps he'll be here when you wake up." But as the night deepened and a light snow began to fall, Olivia's concern grew into genuine fear. What if he was injured out there? What if the cattle had led him far from the ranch? She paced the main room, adding wood to the fire to keep it blazing as a beacon, occasionally stepping onto the porch to peer into the darkness. Just after midnight, when the snow was falling steadily, she heard the sound of hoofbeats. Grabbing a lantern, she rushed outside to see Garrett slumped in the saddle, his face pale beneath a layer of dirt and ice crystals. "Thank God," she breathed, hurrying to help him dismount. "I was so worried. Got the cattle," he said through chattering teeth. "All safe now." "And you're half frozen," she scolded, supporting him as they moved toward the house. His clothes were soaked through, and his hands were like ice when they brushed against hers. Inside, she guided him to the chair closest to the fire. "You need to get out of these wet clothes." "I'll fetch some dry ones." In his bedroom, she quickly located a clean shirt, pants, and thick socks, averting her eyes from the personal items that spoke of the man: a razor on the washstand, a Bible on the bedside table, a small framed photograph of a pretty blonde woman who must have been Catherine. When she returned, Garrett had managed to remove his boots but was struggling with the buttons of his shirt, his fingers too numb to function properly. "Let me," she said without thinking, setting down the dry clothes and moving to help him. He looked up at her, surprise evident in his eyes, but he didn't protest, as she deftly unfastened the frozen buttons. It was only as she helped him shrug out of the sodden garment that she realized the intimacy of what she was doing. His skin was icy to the touch, but beneath the cold, she could feel the solid muscle earned from years of hard work. Flushing, she handed him the dry shirt. "I'll make some coffee, you should change the rest." In the kitchen area, she busied herself with the coffee pot, her hands trembling slightly. When she returned to the fire, Garrett was dressed in the dry clothes, his wet ones hanging on a chair near the hearth. His hair was damp and tousled, making him look younger, more vulnerable. "Here," she said, pressing the hot mug into his hands. "Drink this," he obeyed, sipping carefully at the steaming liquid. "Thank you," he said after a moment, "for waiting up, for helping. Of course, I was worried when you didn't return." She sat in the chair opposite him. "What happened out there?" "Found the cattle about 5 miles north, heading for the high pasture. Got them turned around, but then the snow started, had to move slow to keep them together." He took another sip of coffee. Should have taken Daniel up on his offer to hire another hand. "You can't do everything alone," Olivia said gently. He looked at her over the rim of his mug, his expression unreadable in the firelight. "Been doing it that way since Catherine died. Seemed easier than letting people in." The honesty of the statement caught her off guard. "And now?" He set the mug down and leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Now I'm not so sure. Emma's different since you came, happier, more like the child she should be. She's a remarkable little girl. She just needed to feel safe, to know she wouldn't be abandoned again, like the others did." It wasn't a question. "Why did they leave?" Olivia asked, finally voicing the question that had been on her mind for weeks. Garrett sighed, running a hand through his damp hair. "First one left because her beau came calling from back east. Second couldn't stand the isolation. Third said Emma was too difficult, too closed off." His jaw tightened. "Told her to pack her things that same day." "It wasn't Emma's fault," Olivia said, a protective instinct flaring within her. "No, it wasn't. It was mine. I didn't see what I was doing to her by bringing strangers into her life only to have them leave." He looked directly at Olivia. "Which is why I need to know, Miss Porter. Are you planning to stay, really stay?" The intensity of his gaze made her heart race. "I told you before, I have nowhere else to go. That's not what I'm asking. I'm asking if you want to be here with us. Yes, she said simply. I do. Something shifted in his expression then, a softening around the eyes, a relaxing of the tight line of his mouth. Good, he said quietly. That's good. The storm that night marked a turning point. Garrett began including Olivia in decisions about the ranch, asking her opinion on whether to sell certain cattle before winter, consulting her about supplies they would need to see them through until spring. He showed her how to use the rifle kept above the door just in case, and taught her to recognize the signs of approaching weather. For her part, Olivia took on more responsibilities, not just with Emma but with the household. She learned to make soap from the fat rendered during butchering, to preserve vegetables from the small garden, to mend tears in work clothes with neat, strong stitches. Emma blossomed under their joint care. Her lessons progressed rapidly. She was bright and eager to learn, and her natural exuberance emerged more each day. She followed Olivia around like a shadow, asking questions about Boston, about books, about why the sky was blue and the grass green. And each night, when Olivia tucked her in, Emma's goodnight hugs grew longer, her small arms clinging as if to reassure herself that Olivia would still be there in the morning. Winter descended on the valley with a vengeance that year. Snow piled high around the cabin, and on the worst days, they couldn't even open the door until Garrett dug them out. But inside, warmed by the fire and by the growing bonds between them, they created their own small world. In the evenings, after Emma was asleep, Olivia and Garrett would often sit by the fire, talking in low voices about their pasts, their hopes, the future of the ranch. She learned that he'd grown up in New York, the son of Irish immigrants, and had headed west after the war in search of open spaces and peace. He learned that her parents had died of influenza when she was 16, leaving her to make her way in the world alone. "You're not alone anymore," he told her one night as they watched the snow fall outside the window. It wasn't a declaration of love, not yet, but it was a promise of sorts, and Olivia treasured it. As Christmas approached, Emma could talk of nothing else. "Will there be presents?" she asked one morning at breakfast. "And a tree like at the Sullivans' last year?" Garrett looked at Olivia, a question in his eyes. "I think we can manage that," Olivia said. "In fact, I've been saving scraps of fabric to make a new dress for your doll." Emma's eyes widened. "Really? And can we make cookies like you talked about, the ones shaped like stars? If your father can spare some sugar and butter." "Yes," Garrett nodded. "I think we can manage that too." His eyes met Olivia's over Emma's head, warm with something that made her heart skip. They cut a small pine tree from the edge of the forest and set it up in the corner of the main room. Olivia showed Emma how to string popcorn and cranberries into garlands, and they cut paper snowflakes to hang from the branches. It wasn't elaborate, but it transformed the cabin into something magical. On Christmas Eve, after Emma had finally fallen asleep, vibrating with excitement for the morning, Garrett and Olivia sat by the fire, a rare glass of whiskey in his hand, a cup of tea in hers. "I have something for you," he said suddenly, setting down his glass and reaching into his pocket. "It's not much, but—" He handed her a small package wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a delicate silver chain with a simple pendant, a small, perfectly formed star. "Garrett," she breathed, running her finger over the polished surface. "It's beautiful. Reminded me of you," he said quietly. "Bright, constant." Their eyes met, and in that moment, Olivia knew with absolute certainty that she had fallen in love with this quiet, strong man who carried his burdens with such dignity, who loved his daughter with such fierce devotion. "I have something for you too," she said, reaching for the small package she'd hidden beneath her chair. "It's even less than yours, I'm afraid." He unwrapped it carefully, a handkerchief she had embroidered with his initials, surrounded by a design of mountain peaks like those visible from the ranch. "You made this?" he asked, running his thumb over the stitching. "Yes, do you like it? No one's made anything for me since." He didn't finish the sentence, but she understood. I wanted you to have something that was just for you. You give so much to this place, to Emma." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and the emotion in his eyes made her breath catch. "Olivia," he said, and it was the first time he had used her given name. "I don't know what we would have done if you hadn't answered that advertisement." "I don't know what I would have done either," she admitted. He reached across the space between them and took her hand in his. It was a small gesture, but profoundly intimate in the quiet of the firelit room. "Merry Christmas, Olivia," he said softly. "Merry Christmas, Garrett." They sat like that, hands linked, the fire crackling, the tree glowing with its simple decorations, until the embers burned low and the night wrapped around them like a blanket. Christmas morning dawned bright and clear, the sun transforming the snow-covered landscape into a sea of diamonds. Emma woke them at first light, her excitement too great to contain. Santa came, she cried, bouncing on Olivia's bed. Olivia laughed, sitting up and gathering the child into a hug. "Did he now? Well, we'd better get up and see what he brought, hadn't we?" In the main room, Emma squealed with delight at the small pile of presents beneath the tree, the doll dress Olivia had sewn. A wooden horse Garrett had carved in secret evenings after Emma was asleep. A picture book ordered from the general store in town, candies, and an orange in her stocking. "This is the best Christmas ever," Emma declared, hugging her newly dressed doll to her chest. Olivia and Garrett exchanged smiles over her head, both wearing their gifts from the night before, the star pendant gleaming at Olivia's throat, the handkerchief peeking from Garrett's pocket. As the winter months passed, the three of them settled into a rhythm that felt increasingly like family. There were difficult days, of course, days when the cold seemed unbearable, when supplies ran low, when Emma tested boundaries with childhood stubbornness. But there were more good days than bad, days filled with small joys and growing affection. By early spring, when the first wildflowers began to appear in patches of melting snow, Olivia had been at the ranch for nearly 8 months. The changes were subtle but significant: Emma's ready smiles and easy affection, Garrett's more frequent laughter, the way their hands would sometimes brush as they worked side by side, lingering a moment longer than necessary. One mild April evening, as Garrett taught Emma to fish in the stream that ran near the cabin, Olivia watched them from the bank. Emma's golden hair caught the late sunlight, and Garrett's patient instructions were punctuated by her delighted giggles. The scene filled Olivia with such contentment that it almost frightened her. Happiness, in her experience, had always been fleeting. "Miss Porter, look, I caught one." Emma's voice broke into her thoughts as the child proudly displayed a small trout wriggling on the end of her line. "Well done." Olivia called back, "That will be perfect for supper." Later, as they ate the fish Garrett had cleaned and Olivia had fried, Emma announced, "Tommy Sullivan says his mama is going to have a baby." Garrett nearly choked on his water. "Is that so?" "Uh-huh. He says the baby's in her tummy right now, but it will come out soon and then he'll be a big brother." Emma looked thoughtfully at her plate. "Was I ever in Mama's tummy?" Olivia held her breath, watching Garrett's face. He rarely spoke of Catherine, and Emma rarely asked. "Yes," he said finally. "You were, and she was very happy to have you there. But then she died. It wasn't a question. Yes, she got very sick after you were born." Emma considered this. If you and Miss Porter had a baby, would Miss Porter die too? The question hung in the air between them. Olivia felt heat rise to her cheeks, and Garrett's ears turned distinctly red. "No, sweetheart," he said carefully. "Your mama's death was very sad, but it doesn't happen to most mothers." "Good," Emma said decisively, "because I want Miss Porter to stay forever." She turned to Olivia. "You will, won't you?" Olivia's heart squeezed painfully in her chest. "I hope to," she said softly. Emma seemed satisfied with this answer and returned to her fish, but Olivia was acutely aware of Garrett's eyes on her for the rest of the meal. That night, after Emma was asleep, Olivia slipped outside to the porch. The night was clear, stars scattered across the velvet sky like diamonds on black cloth. She wrapped her shawl more tightly around her shoulders against the lingering chill. The door opened behind her and Garrett stepped out, a blanket in his hands. "Thought you might need this," he said, draping it around her shoulders, his hands lingering a moment. "Thank you." She smiled up at him. "It's such a beautiful night, I couldn't stay inside." He nodded, leaning against the porch railing beside her. "Emma's question at supper, I'm sorry if it made you uncomfortable." "It didn't," Olivia assured him. "Children say what they think, it's refreshing, really. Still," he cleared his throat, "she's grown very attached to you." "And I to her." They stood in silence for a moment, the only sounds the distant call of a night bird and the soft whisper of the breeze through the pines. "When Catherine died," Garrett said suddenly, "I thought that was it for me. Thought I'd raise Emma alone, just the two of us against the world." He turned to look at her, his face half shadowed in the moonlight. Never expected to feel this way again. Olivia's heart began to race. What way? Instead of answering, he reached out and gently touched the star pendant at her throat. "When I saw this in the general store, I knew it had to be yours. Knew it belonged right here." His fingers brushed against her skin, sending a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the cool night air. "Garrett," she whispered, hardly daring to believe what was happening. "I'm not good with words, Olivia, never have been, but I need you to know what you've come to mean to us, to Emma and to me." His hand moved to cup her cheek. "You've brought light back into this home, into our lives." "You've given me a home," she said, leaning slightly into his touch. "Something I thought I'd never have again." His eyes, dark in the moonlight, searched hers. "Is it enough, this life? It's not Boston. It's hard and sometimes lonely, and it's everything," she interrupted. "You and Emma are everything I could want." And then he was kissing her, gently at first, as if afraid she might break or disappear, and then with growing confidence as she responded, her hands coming up to rest against his chest. His arms encircled her, drawing her closer, the blanket falling forgotten to the porch floor. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing unevenly, he rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Olivia Porter. Have for months now." "I love you too," she said, the words she'd held inside for so long finally finding voice. "So much." He kissed her again, deeper this time, his hands tangling in her hair, loosening pins until it fell in waves around her shoulders. "Marry me," he murmured against her lips. "Be my wife. Be Emma's mother in truth, not just in heart." Joy burst within her like sunrise. "Yes," she breathed. "Yes, Garrett O'Malley, I will marry you." They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in Willow Creek, with Emma as their only attendant, proudly scattering wildflower petals down the aisle before them. Grace and Daniel Sullivan stood as witnesses, Grace wiping away tears as Garrett and Olivia exchanged simple vows. "I knew it," Grace whispered to Olivia afterward as they shared a celebratory meal at the town's only restaurant. "From the moment I met you, I knew you were exactly what Garrett and Emma needed." "They're what I needed too," Olivia replied, watching as Garrett swung a laughing Emma in a circle, his face more carefree than she'd ever seen it. That night, after they'd returned to the ranch and put an exhausted Emma to bed, Garrett led Olivia to what was now their bedroom. He'd moved his things earlier in the week, leaving Emma the small room to herself, a change the child had accepted with surprising equanimity. "Mrs. O'Malley," he said, closing the door behind them and drawing her into his arms. "I like the sound of that." "So do I," she whispered, suddenly shy despite the months of growing affection between them. He seemed to sense her nervousness and kissed her gently. "We have all the time in the world, Olivia, tonight and all the nights to come." His tenderness brought tears to her eyes. "I never thought I'd find this, someone to love who loves me in return." "You deserve all the love in the world," he said, brushing away a tear with his thumb, "and I plan to spend the rest of my life giving it to you." Later, as they lay together in the darkness, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder, Olivia felt a sense of rightness, of completion. The journey that had brought her to this remote Montana ranch, to this man and his daughter, had not been easy. But every step, every hardship had led her exactly where she was meant to be. "What are you thinking?" Garrett murmured, his voice a rumble beneath her ear. "That I'm happy," she said simply. "Truly, completely happy." His arms tightened around her. "So am I, love, so am I." The next morning, Emma burst into their room at dawn, apparently unfazed by finding Olivia in her father's bed. "Are you my mother now?" she asked, climbing up to nestle between them. Olivia exchanged a look with Garrett, who nodded encouragingly. "If you'd like me to be, yes." Emma considered this for a moment, then nodded decisively. "I would like that, very much." "Then I am," Olivia said, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "And you are my daughter, and I love you more than I can say." Emma threw her arms around Olivia's neck, burying her face against her shoulder. "Don't ever leave us," she whispered, the words muffled but clear. "Never," Olivia promised, holding the child close, feeling Garrett's strong arms encircle them both. "I will never leave you. This is where I belong. This is home." As spring turned to summer, the ranch flourished under their joint care. Garrett, with Olivia's encouragement, hired a young cowhand to help with the cattle, allowing him more time with his family. Olivia expanded the vegetable garden and began keeping chickens, the fresh eggs a welcome addition to their meals. Emma, secure in the knowledge that her family was now complete and permanent, thrived. She began attending the small school in Willow Creek once a week, riding in with Garrett when he went to town for supplies, eager to learn alongside other children. In August, as they celebrated Olivia's first year at the ranch, she and Garrett sat on the porch after Emma was asleep, watching a meteor shower streak across the night sky. "Make a wish," Garrett said as a particularly bright star fell. Olivia smiled, leaning against his shoulder. "I don't need to. I already have everything I could wish for." He kissed the top of her head. "Even with all the hard work, the isolation, the winters, even with all of that, especially with all of that." She placed his hand over her still flat stomach, "And soon we'll have even more." His eyes widened as he understood her meaning. "Olivia, are you certain?" She nodded, her smile radiant in the starlight. "The baby should arrive around February. I've suspected for a few weeks, but wanted to be sure before I told you." With a whoop of joy that surely carried across the valley, Garrett lifted her from her chair and spun her around, then set her down gently as if she might break. "A baby," he breathed, dropping to his knees to press his ear against her stomach. "Our baby." "Emma will be thrilled to be a big sister," Olivia said, running her fingers through his hair. "She'll be the best big sister any child could want." He looked up at her, eyes shining with unshed tears. "And you, Olivia O'Malley, will be the best mother. You already are." The baby, a boy they named James Daniel O'Malley, arrived during a February blizzard with Grace Sullivan acting as midwife. He had Garrett's green eyes and a tuft of Olivia's chestnut hair, and from the moment he drew his first breath, he was the center of their world. Emma took to her role as big sister with solemn responsibility, helping Olivia change diapers and rock the baby when he was fussy, singing the lullabies she remembered Olivia singing to her. One evening in early spring, as Olivia nursed James by the fire, Emma climbed onto the arm of her chair and leaned against her shoulder, watching her brother with fascination. "He's so small," she observed. "Was I that small?" "Even smaller," Garrett said from where he sat at the table, carving a new toy horse for Emma. "But you grew strong and beautiful, just like your brother will." Emma was quiet for a moment, contemplative in the way that sometimes still caught Olivia by surprise. "I'm glad you answered Papa's letter," she said finally. "I'm glad you didn't leave like the others." "So am I, sweetheart." Olivia shifted James to her shoulder, freeing one arm to wrap around Emma. "This is exactly where I was meant to be." Garrett rose from the table and came to stand beside them, one hand on Olivia's shoulder, the other gently stroking James's downy head. The firelight played across their faces, casting a golden glow over the tableau. They created not a perfect family, perhaps, with their complicated past and the challenges that still lay ahead, but a true one, forged from loss and hope and the courage to begin again. Outside, the Montana night spread its star-filled canopy over the valley, over the ranch that was no longer just a place but a home, over the four souls whose lives had become so thoroughly, wonderfully entwined that it was impossible to imagine them any other way. And as Emma began to sing softly to her brother, as Garrett's hand found Olivia's and squeezed gently, as James drifted to sleep in the circle of his mother's arms, Olivia knew with absolute certainty that she had found what she had always sought, not just shelter or security, but belonging. Love. Family, home,